Tell us who you are.
Who am I? I'm a fellow UFO researcher trying to find out how much of this is actually true and how much not. And I've been at it for a long time, since 1962, when I was just a kid learning to fly and studying flying books, and I ended up getting some flying books out of the library one day, and a flying saucer book fell off the shelf. I picked it up. It was written by retired Major Donald Keyhoe, and that got me interested in that. I realized it wasn't science fiction, that there was some very serious reports going on that were needed, that were very credible from professional witnesses. And that's when when I turned 14, I joined National Investigation Committee of Aerial Phenomenon, became a field investigator for a while, and some unusual sightings that happened.
So you were in the commercial airline business for a while?
Started commercially, well, I started flying when I was 10, and started teaching flying when I was 17, and then worked into flying for, I've flown for several airlines, but I started commercially flying at 18, and I've been flying ever since, just for different airlines. And I'm a captain with a major airline now.
So when you got into deeper research, was it after you seen sightings, or what prompted you?
No, in fact, I hadn't seen anything unusual. Only up until the last 3 years have I seen some unusual things flying. So it's got to be a frustration for most researchers, because they go years and years and years, and you know, you're believing in something that you really never have any solid proof of, as far as your own eyes seeing something. And so many times the people that are into this field of research they're so desperate to get something to kind of back up what they're saying, that a lot of times they're seeing Venus or whatever and misidentifying some unusual, maybe government craft or flocks of birds or whatever. But and I think some of the more unusual sightings that people are seeing recently are government craft. But I think from what I've found from my sources, we're dealing with about a 20% factor that are definitely craft from another world, but it's not like they're popping in and out every minute.
So you've met a lot of other researchers and coverings of this phenomena over the past few years.
I actually did. I was almost terminated from my job 9 years ago. Two co-pilots turned me in, thought I'd lost my marbles, and I was very frustrated that, in America we have a Constitution of freedom of speech rights, and you work so hard to gain a good career in the aviation field, and to have some very small-minded thinkers try to take your career away just for your beliefs in an unusual subject. I mean, we can talk about wild sex or unusual religious beliefs or anything, but when it came to UFOs in the cockpit, it was a no-no. And to a lot of pilots, it still is. It's just a subject that still has the high ridicule factor, which is sad. I mean, we're almost approaching the end of the millennium, and we've got technology outpacing humanity, and we're still having this high ridicule factor of the subject, even though it's getting better. I mean, there's just a lot of information being put out on the media, television shows almost every week in America and Britain, and many UFO magazines out now. And like I was saying in my lecture, I went to Burma and was going through this little tribe, and out of the hut came a little kid. He has X-File hat on and the alien T-shirt on, and it's definitely reached a worldwide point of more acceptance. I mean, I was in Sweden last 2 weeks ago giving a lecture at a conference there in Sweden, in Oslo, and I was at the castle where the guards are protecting the king, and they found out I was a pilot. I just walked up to them, asking them about their job guarding the castle, and they said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm an airline pilot." And they said, "Oh, we know all about the UFOs and Area 51 and Roswell." And I said, "That's an unusual conversation going on here," but that's how it's kind of going. Wherever I go around these places in the world, Israel, Russia, Moscow had a show on 8 o'clock on Fridays, prime time, 3 years ago, dealing with all this unusual subjects.
What was your purpose of your traveling? You just lecturing?
Well, I was doing a show like you. I was given an opportunity by a friend who was a manager of a commercial TV station. He says, "Look, I really believe that there's a lot of hidden information that needs to be put out We're an independent station. We don't have a legal staff to worry about censorship. I'm going to give you 30 minutes every day, 5 days a week, if you want to have this show on, and we'll see how it goes. No. That's another station down in Las Vegas. This show was in Raleigh. The original title of the show was UFOs and Psychic Investigations, because my partner on the show was an ex-government psychic, a profiler for the Psychic Task Force. And if you don't think the United States government and others don't work with psychics and whatever else they can get their hands on that are real, there's so many phonies or people that have
it's here in Australia as well, apparently.
But there are the governments search out the real gifted ones, and there's different techniques they do to find them. They even follow up tabloid stories of some little kid that's bending spoons or having dreams that are coming true, and they go, try to recruit these people if they can. Usually not young kids, but they follow to check it out to see if the parents have gifts, and then they try to recruit them in to work with them. So that's a whole nother subject in itself. But we did the show, 547 shows, 5 days a week on every kind of unexplained phenomena, but the main focus was the UFO cover-up and a lot of stuff regarding the metaphysical. So I would go off with my camera and go to Russia or Bali or China, not China, but I went to many other, the only country I didn't cover was China. And we did these very low budget shows, just interviews like this with different researchers. And
was there any hassles or any?
The only time they tried to take the show off the air, they blocked the signal for the first 10 minutes of the show because we did a week on the secret government, and they didn't like that. So that was the one time where they tried to, when people tune in, they thought there was nothing on the air. But once we got off that subject, and amazingly enough, the UFO thing was the hottest subject everybody wanted to hear about. And life after death, that was another real popular one.
So in your travels, based on some of your lectures tonight, you found other details open about Roswell and Dr. Wolf, is that right?
Yeah. Some of the information I shared today was some controversial stuff regarding the cloning and what our government really knows about cloning. Anytime a story, and I'm sure you found this in your research, is by the time a secret aircraft is presented to the public, or a concept of the Mars rock, they knew that Mars rock had signs of the life elements a long time ago. That's one good way to soften the blow. Yes, there is life out there, but don't worry about it. It was 2 billion years ago. There's nothing out there now, and it kind of helps.
Papers here reported how it would affect religion, and had religious aspects and points of view of what would happen to the public, and they were accepting.
Sure. I mean, they've had 50 years to prepare mankind for this, and it's a very compartmentalized process. How the whole thing has worked. It's a incredibly well orchestrated cover-up, but what better way than to create the ridicule factor. I showed some commercials. I'm sure you're having the UFO commercials on time.
Yeah, we have a Kodak commercial.
Yeah. That was the #1 commercial in America last year. I showed that at my lecture in Leeds, England. But we're getting a lot more. So like the one I showed with the candy bar commercial.
I didn't see that one, missed it.
It makes it into a cartoon of the Roswell incident, and it shows a lecturer giving the speech about the Roswell and the alien autopsy. And the biggest conspiracy is why nobody's buying our candy bars. So, that's the biggest conspiracy of all time. And that one just started airing. So, and you got there are many different commercials coming out. But the stores are the #1 item in the retail markets for the young teenagers now are the alien artifacts, so the showing the grays and the different paraphernalia relating to the alien subject. So it's definitely reached a fever pitch. I mean, I was in Bangkok, I was down in Sao Paulo. Even a lot of your stores around here, they're selling alien underwear, alien condoms. I mean, it just goes on and on. So it's definitely become a mainstream subject that at least you can have somewhat of an intelligent.
Very blasé.
Other than the reporter I had to deal with today, that definitely didn't have a clue how serious a subject it is, and that's a problem. That usually they're a lot more open-minded about it, and they'll write a even keel story. The pro and the cons of this.
I doubt anything gets written about UFOs here in Melbourne. It's very, very minor. If it's a major sighting, it's small.
Yeah.
Usually, unless it's seen by mass, like the comet we had sort of pass through our atmosphere a couple of months back.
But the 50-year Roswell event, I was down there at their conference, and that was fun, seeing a whole. Usually, when you go to these conferences, it's a hotel somewhere in a little conference room, and not much publicity. Where when you get a whole town, where you go to every house you drove by, they had cute little gray aliens out front, or in the main street, every store had an alien theme, and every restaurant you went to, and it was like you felt like you had found home. That finally, hey, even though it's on a comical twist, it's still, you can talk about it without people giving you a funny look.
Well, going back to the more serious stuff, what about these triangular craft and other things you've come up?
Based on what I found out, and that's the first time I'd mentioned that in public, but some people have confided in me, and I don't say it's. I just have to use the what if factor. If we've back engineered alien craft, from what I've learned, not all of it is. We haven't been able to duplicate everything they can do. I think these beings, if they exist, which in my opinion they do, and a lot of other people that are in the know that it's.
So you've spoken to several people in the know.
And I've been very lucky through definitely since 1987. I've been getting a lot more inside help, you might say, and some very high-level people that have shared the information. They don't want their names out, and so it's like everybody goes, "Oh yeah, here we go, another deep throat, high-level source." In their opinions.
Do they say that there's going to be a time or date when certain knowledge will be released? I mean, Nexus magazine reported groups of journalists getting together, finding a route of how they're going to release stuff to the public. But do you know anything about that?
One general who's retired, even 3 years ago, he said they were getting very close to making statements. Now, there has been speculation from a friend of mine that was around the area that back in this September that President Clinton did contact somebody and said that they were getting much closer to maybe things were going to be accelerating regarding this. I'm not saying Clinton's in the loop. I think some presidents were more in the loop than others. I think George Bush was definitely in the loop, being the ex-head of the CIA.
He's the first to mention that term, the loop.
Yeah. Well, it's on a need-to-know basis. I mean, not every president is told everything, because they know sometimes they're only going to be in office 4 years. But it's a very compartmentalized thing. That's why I think that there seems to be, based on the people I've met with, there's a faction within this government. And when I speak of the government, it's not the elected officials. They're just, they got voted in, and they're just doing their jobs in their capacity, trying to, and get reelected. But there's a different aspect of the government that most people, aren't aware of. I never was until about 1987. I thought it was all just conspiracy theories until let's just say I was shown enough evidence to know it was the basic concepts of the idea of a secret government were pretty much true, and there were reasons for it.
This is what Bob Lazar, the so-called worker for Area 51, mentioned.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I'm just saying it does exist, and so there's just a lot involved and tied in with that in the UFO thing, and there's one group in this secret government, let's say, that feels, hey, enough is enough. It's been 50 years. Mankind maybe is ready for it now. They do like secret checks all the time on the public polls financed by the government, I believe, on.
You think this is part of the propaganda with all the X-Files and Dark Skies and advertisements?
Well, now see, Dark Skies that was an interesting show. How that show even got on the air. Supposedly Bryce Zabel, who also was the writer of that movie that was filmed down here, Official Denial, and he was supposedly.
I don't think we've seen. I don't know if we've seen that.
It made it look like it was filmed in America, but it was filmed down here. It was all about alien abductions and the UFO cover-up. It wasn't.
Oh, we've seen the series, yeah. So it suddenly got cut off, didn't it?
It was an alien autopsy of a gray, and I showed clips of it in my presentation today.
It was made here in Australia?
Yes.
Probably Queensland.
I'm not quite sure where. A friend of mine is married to the guy who was the executive producer, but the guy who wrote the script was Bryce Zabel, and then he ended up going on to be the executive producer and creator of Dark Skies, which was to be a whole history of the alien.
I read the two writers behind that were surprised that it's very much parallel to Bill Cooper's work.
Yeah. Well, they said that some people from the government approached them and shared information and took them into NBC to meet with executives and showed them enough credentials of who they were and that the information may be legitimate, but whether it was or wasn't, it was...
What about the so-called alien that goes down your throat?
Yeah.
What do you call it? The high...
Well, that part, in my opinion, the show originally aired as a 2-hour TV special, and then it was going on the next week as a half-hour show or hour show, and they showed the ratings where it was the first hour before they showed that Gangloid thing. The show was the #1 show being shown that night, and it had had some high numbers, demographics and listeners. And then once the second part where they got into the Gangloid thing and where they should have just left that whole thing out, and they carried with that theme through all the shows beyond that point, and the viewership dropped in half.
Yeah, I think the opinion is that the Gangloid might represent mind control, not necessarily the alien itself.
It was a mistake by the producers, the creators of the show, to put that concept in. They thought it would add some special effect value to it, and it really destroyed a lot of validity in the show, and I think they realize that now. The show didn't do well in the ratings after that, but it was on the right course for a while until they tied in. They got a little too much involved with some weird stuff that wasn't really tied in with the real truth of the matter. But I heard Bryce Zabel now is involved with trying to get a more documentary type show on the air with the guy who created the TV movie special Intruders.
And tell me more about some of the other things that you've come across, some facts, some more meaty bits. Is there anything that you can talk about? Is there things that you think might come out in the public that you know about that will come out?
Well, it's nothing the Aussies haven't heard before, I think. But as far as I think the two most secret places on Earth are Pine Gap and there's a secret base in Russia. And both these bases are, from what I've heard and learned, are even more secret than Area 51. The flyable craft that were back engineered, from what I've heard also from these different people, have been moved. There were just too many people coming out there, so much press after Bob Lazar's story. People going out the little alien and all that and looking for these things. And so
there's reports of scalar wave interferometry testing in an Australian desert, reported in Nexus magazine, and the Parliament, West Australian Parliament actually, about involvement with the Om Supreme sect. Some connection there.
I spent 11 days out by Alice Springs and Pine Gap, and there's definitely some strange stuff going on there. The Aborigines are pretty much the only ones, other than the workers at Pine Gap, that are able to walk the land, and I'm sure some of them I talked to had seen some unusual craft coming, flying around there, but they wouldn't let me interview them on video. They were real private about it as far as that goes, but they had some very fascinating stories to tell of what they've seen out there. But a human being, from what I understand, Pine Gap, if you penetrate, is shoot to kill, where at least Area 51 they take you in and debrief you or something. But Pine Gap's evidently a much more sensitive base. Massive underground tunnel systems. evidently there's the tunnel drilling systems, that equipment that can drill these, bore these things, can drill maybe 2 or 3 miles a day of tunnel. And it's done by some kind of sonic resonating machine based on Tesla technology that was followed through. And Howard Hughes actually got the technology from the Germans, and they were working with Tesla technology back in the 30s. And then he evidently sold it off to the government, and they built these massive underground tunnel systems throughout the Southwest and in Russia and your country.
Our country.
And under Pine Gap. What you see at Pine Gap with the little radar domes is just,
we know.
That's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's...
So, the technology with the Nazis, what do you know about that? Is that, or was just a throw?
There's all kinds of theories about that. What I've been told, which I would say the credibility factor of the sources on this information is very high, even though that, why believe me? I'm just another guy throwing out bits of information that could be or couldn't be fact or fiction, fantasy. But basically what I've learned, and it's only been recently, is the original, the Germans did recover a craft. 1933, it supposedly happened on March 28th in a small town in Germany. I think the name is pronounced Liested or Lidsted, Germany, and it was Hitler's soldiers found this thing. It was not did not have any life forms. It was like an alien probe, and so they thought it was a secret weapon from somebody else. But then they thought, if this was a secret weapon, then the war is over, or the war hadn't started yet. But I mean, as far as we don't have to worry about trying to take anybody on, if they've got this technology, they're so far ahead of us. So they didn't know what to make of this thing, but they started to try to back engineer it, and they never were able to get a real craft flying. And I'm not even sure that it was a saucer-shaped thing. It was from the reports I've heard from these guys that have seen the findings that our government knows about. It was more of a oval-shaped thing. Of course, the Roswell thing was never concluded that it was disc-shaped. It was more of a, more of a shape like this. Kind of what Kenneth Arnold saw flying in formation. They didn't look quite like flying saucers, but some of these craft are disc-shaped. Of course, we have many different types of flying aircraft in the world ourselves.
Is there anything else that you wanted to say about some of the stuff you said tonight, this afternoon? Dr. Wolf, you did some research on him?
Yeah, it's too bad I didn't get to show that interview, but he'd never allowed anybody to interview him before. But he, through my sources, even though I know Stanton Friedman, probably your viewers know who he is.
He came to Australia recently.
Yeah, and he debunks Dr. Wolf. He's known about Dr. Wolf since '89, and Friedman is an interesting guy and a very intelligent individual. I got nothing against him except, do a little more homework on these type of accusations. Yes, his educational background does not check out. He does have a BS and a master's degree and a PhD. I've not been able to confirm he has an MD from McGill University, and I probably never will. Their records show nothing, but that's not unusual for people that have worked 20 years in highly classified secret projects. And his education was financed and by the United States government when they heard about him while he was in high school, which is the same thing they'd heard about Bob Lazar while he was in high school, that he had very exceptional talents in certain areas. When the government hears about this, they recruit these people and fund their university and other educational studies, and yet there's no record of it. They tell the educational institutions, we don't want these people's records on file. And of course, anybody listening will probably go, you got to be kidding, who's going to believe this? Do your homework, check it out, see if, of course, the universities aren't going to deny this or admit to this because they get a lot of government grants. So of course they aren't going to admit to this of people like Dr. Wolf But basically, I found out he worked at Area 51 in the S4 area from June of 72 to June of 77. He also worked at the Dulce base. And I believe strongly that he did at very limited times, but he did work directly with some kind of intelligence from another world. I mean, and he has a whole different perspective on this. The human mind we're so used to this box of reality of we take the kids to school, we pick them up, and we pay our bills, and we work our job, and we go to the movies on Saturdays and do our little hobbies, and that's our reality. And the whole reality of what our scientists have learned from working with these beings is something hopefully will someday be put in a book, and maybe the public will, even though they'll be stunned and like this can't be, I think it will be an incredible book, and I hope Dr. Wolf puts it out, or somebody else. He's not well, and his book that he has out called Catchers of Heaven is labeled fiction, and it's not an easy read. There's a lot of stuff not related to the alien agenda and what he was involved in, but he throws in a lot of tidbits in the book about what he learned, and not everybody believes the book, and a lot of researchers thought it was a piece of junk. Well, that's their loss. But he's a fascinating guy. Here's a scientist that, in my opinion, in my research, is very, very intelligent. I have been able to confirm where he worked and what he was involved with, and yet it's totally put out on the internet by these people that say, hey, we've called his relatives, and they say it's all lies. I've called his relatives too, and the story I get from him is not the story that has been put out on the internet regarding this scientist. So somebody's getting their wires crossed somewhere. They definitely want to debunk this guy, and it's sad that it's like that, because he's not making any money on the book. All the money goes to charity. But he's just one of many people that are out there that are slowly coming forward. This Colonel Corso, that's a whole other world with his book. And I asked his son, I said, how did your father come about putting this book out after all these years? And he said he called the family in. He says, there's something I want to share with you after all these years. I'm getting up in age. He's 84, and I feel you have a right to know. And so at the end of the meeting, I asked his son, Phil Corso Jr., I said, what'd you feel? What'd you think about all that? And he said, I was first totally in shock, because I never believed in any of this stuff, and then I was in total disgust that the governments of the world felt they had the right to keep this from mankind. And so the family got together, and we decided, Pop, don't worry about us, this is worth getting this information out. We don't care what they try to do to us financially or whatever. And so that 3 years later, the book came out. And
What's the name of the book?
The Day After Roswell. It's in any bookstore in Australia. And there's another excellent book out, came out the same month, ironically, called Alien Agenda by investigative journalist Jim Marrs, who was also the investigative journalist on a best-selling book called Crossfire on the Kennedy assassination, which was the movie JFK was based on his book, and now he's done this very well-written book on the UFO cover-up. So both those books I would highly recommend to anybody who's skeptical on this, Day After Roswell and Alien Agenda by Jim Marrs. And if you have an open mind and are used to not an easy read book, Dr. Wolf's book Catchers of Heaven is an interesting one.